Hey everyone. Woo! Yeah! I'm going to rank everything I read in the months of April, May and June. I read 9 books with a total of 2,900 pages, which I'm fairly happy with. There were a couple of weeks there where I wasn't reading much and I was reading a book, I'll get to it, which was going very slowly. So 2,900 pages I think was fine. Towards the end there I had to read 40 pages a day in order to make it to the end of my TBR pile, which I did. So there's a lot of good stuff here. Lots of 4 stars, a couple of 5 stars, a few 3 stars. But just before we get to that, as a side note, I read a bunch of comics actually, because on the 4th of May, Star Wars Day, it was Free Comic Book Day. For those that don't know, on the first Saturday of the month of May is Free Comic Book Day, where basically comic book stores around the world give out free comics that are specially created for the day. So it says like Free Comic Book Day, things like Star Wars and all sorts of things. There are about 40 to 50 comics put out. Most comic book stores give you about 3 or 4. There are 2 comic book stores in Sydney giving out free comic books, and I went with 2 of my kids, so that meant we got 24 comics. It's a good chance to try out stuff that you wouldn't normally read. Anyway, enough of that, on to the books. So I'm going to go in order of ranking from lowest to highest. So starting off with a few 3 stars. And the first one is Mattimeo by Jacques, which is the 3rd book in the Redwall series. And I said in my TBR video that if I gave this book a 3 star, I'd have to question whether I continue with the series. Now, I am giving it a 3 stars, but I am going to continue with the series. It's fun enough. I kind of enjoy reading them. It's just that it's nothing really special. And I think, as is the case with the first 2 books, the length is a bit much for what is contained in the story. But it's a light read, and I know some people, their favourite books are later in the series, so hopefully they will be my favourites as well. Next up, So Long and Thanks for All the Fish by Douglas Adams. This is the 4th book in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy trilogy, like it says there. And yes, unfortunately, I'm only giving this one 3 stars. I gave the last one 4 stars. This one, unfortunately, not quite as funny as the first 3. And I think the major problem is that most of it is set on Earth, which it's the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and they're not really going anywhere. And it's interesting actually to compare Douglas Adams with Terry Pratchett in terms of their trajectory of their writing, because I see some similarities, and I'll go into that in more depth when I do a full review of this book. So long, and thanks for the 3 stars. Next up, Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury, and I don't know whether people will disagree with me on this one, but I give this one 3 stars. It had some good stuff in it, but I don't think I like Ray Bradbury's prose. It's a bit flowery for me, and I don't think the book actually went anywhere. And it just felt a bit... I'm not quite sure how to express my feelings about this. This is one of the books where I really slowed down while I was reading it, just because I didn't enjoy the prose. Some parts were fine, but other parts I just... Anyway, it just didn't gel with me, so 3 stars for this one. Okay, now we're into the 4 stars, and the first one is Notes from a Small Island by Bill Bryson. This is a travel book. I thought about giving it a 3, but I think it's worth 4. He's quite a funny writer. He's a bit of a grumpy kind of guy, which is sometimes funny, but can sometimes be a bit depressing. But yeah, he travels around England, he gives funny anecdotes. It was an enjoyable read. Phantastes by George MacDonald. Now this, I gave 4 stars to, with some caveats. This is kind of regarded as one of the first adult fantasy novels ever. It was published in 1858, and a lot of it is quite hard going. There are parts that I really enjoyed, but parts that, yeah, it really slowed down my reading. And even the introduction by C.S. Lewis actually says that, yes, George MacDonald is not the best writer. It's about what he was doing that's actually interesting and worthwhile. So I'm not really interested in ever reading this again, but I think it's worth 4 stars just because of its place in history. And hopefully I'll be having a discussion with Ed over at Dutch Greybeard where we will talk about this book if he finishes it. He said he was struggling at the start. So, Ed, I'm still waiting for your email. Next up, How to Train Your Dragon by Cressida Cowell. Now, this is, of course, the first book in the How to Train Your Dragon series. And it's just a light, fun read. It's a quick read. My son has the whole series, so I'm going to read through them all. It's quite different from the movie. The movie, I guess, kind of jazzes things up a bit. It's like the movie is targeted at a slightly older audience than this book. There are some quite funny bits in this, so this gets 4 stars, and it's a good start to the series. So looking forward to reading the next ones. Next up is 2061 by Arthur C. Clarke. This is the 3rd book in the 2001 series, and this was a fantastic book. Now, as I was reading it, I was thinking, I'm going to give this 5 stars. This is just so enjoyable. And I'm only giving it 4 stars because I think the ending just fell a bit flat. After being such a great book, the ending was just like, oh, okay. This was first published in 1988, so Arthur C. Clarke by this time had a lot of writing experience, and it really shows compared to some of his earlier stuff. His earlier stuff is great, but this, he just has a mastery of writing a good story, except for that ending. But otherwise, this is a fantastic read, highly recommended. And now we get to our 2 5-star reads. The first one is Legend by David Gemmell. Now this is a reread for me, and this is a fantastic book. There's great character work, and their development and the way that they react to things is very realistic, and what happens in the end is emotional, and it just has a fantastic build-up, and the stakes just keep raising, and it's just fantastic. So I'm looking forward to reading the next books in this series. I will have a full review of this, and I think this is one of those books that every fantasy reader should read, even if they don't read the rest, which I am going to do. This first one, it's only like 400 and spare change, 430 pages, so I think highly recommend that you read this book. And last of all, Shadow of a Dark Queen by Raymond D. Feist. This is book 1 of the Serpentwar saga, and for some reason I have 2 copies. I generally don't do hardbacks because they take up too much room on my bookshelves, and I'm already pressed for space as is. So I'll probably be getting rid of this. But of course, the one nice thing about bigger hardbacks is that the map is more legible than in the mass market paperback. But anyway, about the book, this it's so good to get back into reading Feist. It's been a while for me, and it's just a joy to read. His character work is great, and the story in this one, it's a bit more going back to that kind of, the main character is a 15-year-old boy, and it's his kind of coming of age. So it's a bit more like the first books in the Rift War cycle versus like the last 2 that I read. And it's this kind of band of brothers type thing where there's a bunch of random people put together to do something. And it was just great to read. I'm so glad to be back reading some Rift War. There's 3 more in this series. Again, I'll have a full review of this book at some later stage. But for now, this is the top pick of this last 3 months. Absolutely a 5-star read. So that's my reading for the last 3 months. Have you read any of these books? Do you agree with my rankings? Leave a like and leave a comment. Always love to read your comments, and I always make sure I reply to those. I will see you in the next video, which will be my TBR for the next 3 months. All right, see ya.